I am like I'm so done with this.
Ow.
Hey friends, it's Akidearest. So this video is going to be both me explaining and kind of bitching about my frustrations over something that we're all just done with. Like, for real. And that is Japan's incompetence with just opening the borders. Like, see, okay, I'm going to explain where all of this is coming from. So this morning I was on Twitter and I saw that my friend Charla had posted a tweet leading to this article on the NHK, and I'm going to read that to you right now. Japan is moving to allow individual tourists in again, but the country reopened to foreign holidaymakers in June with the easing of anti-coronavirus border controls. But all tourists are still required to join guided tours and obtain a visa. I'm gonna read a little further into this, but I remember when they said that tourists couldn't come in as long as it's a guided tour. When that came out, nobody wanted that. What are we, 5? Who wants to come to Japan on a guided tour with a strict schedule? Where's the fun in that? You can't enjoy anything. You can't really embrace the Japanese culture with that. So of course, almost no one wanted to take that, and the government could see that. So it leads on to saying, many in the tourism industry insist that the current restrictions are discouraging Western tourists from coming to Japan as they prefer an individual style of traveling. No shit. So the Japanese government has decided to allow tourists to enter the country without joining a guided tour if their visit has been arranged through a travel agency. And the agencies that arrange tours are expected to manage their clients' schedules. Tourists will also be asked to follow guidelines if cases of infection are confirmed, but the government will continue to deny entry to individual travelers who don't make arrangements through travel agencies. The new measure is expected to go into effect in September. Are you fucking kidding me? Why? Well, what is the point of this? Okay, we were really strict on border control, I would say like in the first year and a half, and that made sense. But I would say maybe in the last year or so, they've been doing a lot of really weird things that honestly have little to no effect of the cases rising in Japan. The borders aren't even open yet, and we have more cases now than ever. Actually, even when we were super strict on the coronavirus stuff, there were a lot of rules that still didn't make sense. For example, I remember that the bars were not allowed to serve alcohol after 8 p.m. I guess that was because maybe they thought that a lot of people like to go to the bars and the clubs at night after 8 p.m. So maybe they wanted to discourage people from going if the bars just didn't sell alcohol late at night, which, you know, I went to some places with friends. I'm gonna tell you, they didn't follow that rule. Most people that live in Japan have been able to live their lives fairly normal. The bars are open again. The clubs are running normal hours again. We're holding concerts. I mean, we just had one called Summer Sonic, which is a huge music festival. I think this year we had Megan Thee Stallion and the 1975. I mean, look at this photo. This is from that concert which just happened, and that's insane. And not only that, we're also holding summer festivals, which I got COVID at one of them. So a lot of this is before the borders are even open. So the cases are still going up. So I don't really think that it's fair to say that they're worried about opening the borders because they think all the foreigners are going to give them COVID. Some people are blaming that the rise in cases are strictly just because Japan allowed students to come into Japan, which I think that that's unfair. I mean, we've only allowed like 7,000 of them in the past 2 months, and all of them had to go through a really tedious process to make sure that they were all negative, to make sure that they were all vaccinated. A lot of people have to do that just to come into Japan, and yet Japan is allowing their citizens to go out of the country with near to no problem coming back. And it's just a little unfair and kind of backwards thinking that we're allowing our citizens to go to other countries, but we won't let anyone else come in. It's like, is Japan any different from any other country that has COVID? The only difference I can think of is that Japan has a lot of old people, and older people are at risk of getting more complications with coronavirus. But that's why you should get vaccinated. But a lot of them don't want to get vaccinated. So then they're just stubborn, and then the government's just like, well then, we don't want our old people to get sick, so we're just going to shut everyone out. Because old people take the majority also of the voting population. Also, speaking of old people, the Prime Minister has COVID by this point. And I hope that he heals up really well, and that this will show people that, hey, you know, you can still get COVID, and if you're vaccinated and if you take care of yourself, then you should be fine. Not to mention, the yen is higher than ever, but a lot of people here that don't use foreign currency probably don't care enough. The economy is tanking, and Kyoto, which is one of the best and most popular places in Japan, is bankrupt to shit. And guess what? That place thrives on tourism more than any other prefecture in Japan. Japan has so many problems because it needs money. And a lot of those problems would be solved if you would just open up tourism again. And I get if you're paranoid about COVID, but if you're so paranoid about it, do what the other countries are doing and just have regulations in place for people traveling. Make sure that people are vaccinated. Make sure that people have a negative test when they enter the country, and do it again before they leave. That is literally what everyone else is doing. If everyone else can do that, countries that are bigger than you, countries that get more tourism than you, then why can't you? So the only conclusion that I can make with all of this placed in front of me is that because there's a part of Japan that really doesn't want foreigners to come into Japan. And I hate playing that card sometimes, but I honestly can't think of any other reason. To be honest, it's not even like Japan is really that strict anymore, because we're still holding a lot of events, as I showed you guys before. Technically, we're all actually legally allowed to walk around without our masks now, but a lot of people don't because they don't want to be judged as the first person to take off their mask. Literally, life in Japan is like pretty normal. So that's one part. And I don't want this video just to be like, well, you're being mean to all of the foreigners, right? You're also inconveniencing your own people living in Japan. As far as work goes, when you get COVID in Japan, you're technically not even allowed to work for almost 2 weeks, and you don't get sick leave, so you don't even get paid for getting sick. So the only thing that people ever tell you is, well, the best thing to do is to just not get sick. Well, okay, easier said than done. So there's a lot of people avoiding getting COVID, not so much for health reasons anymore, but a lot of it to do with the fact that if they get COVID, then they can't work or make money. Even though the Japanese government knows that the economy is tanking hard and that they need money, they're doing pretty much anything else besides opening the borders. Myself and many people in Japan have been complaining about this for, I don't even want to think about how long it's been. But a question then kind of came to me of, well, then what do I personally think Japan should do? So the answer for me is not really so much just opening the borders, but a bigger answer would be to just accept COVID. Not in the sense of like, oh, everyone should just get COVID and fuck you all, we're all gonna get sick. No, it's more like, accept that we are at a point now that COVID is literally part of our lives. It's going to be for quite some time, and honestly, I'd argue probably for the rest of our lives. Other countries have just learned to adapt to deal with it when you get it, and to try our best to make the treatment and the healing process as short and as fast and as healthy as possible. The mortality rate is low enough for people to feel confident enough to live their lives normally. The healthcare surrounding COVID is at least good enough to handle COVID when you get it. I think a lot of these companies and people just trying to avoid getting it and running from it constantly and not actually doing anything to help people who do get it have a really unrealistic expectation about life. Because again, I just feel like we are so deep into it now that now the best thing to do is just figure out steps to live with it and just take care of everyone who does get it. I know that this video is a little bit more of a bitchier side to me than normal, but you know, it's not just for foreigners, it's also for Japanese people and Japanese companies who are also waiting for tourism to open back up to help their businesses. There are businesses being closed left and right because of this whole thing. Like, I don't even think some of you can even imagine what it was like when, for example, I went up to Hakodate, which is up north in Japan, and there were signs and posters everywhere that were prepped for all the tourists to come out for Tokyo 2020, for the Olympics, and to help all of these small businesses that have been owned by a lot of old people for decades who were genuinely excited to get all of this tourism and all of this money. And they couldn't because of the borders being closed. But at that time, we still had to be strict, so that couldn't be helped. But the fact that it's still going on at a point where life in Japan is pretty stable and pretty normal now, seems like that there's not really any sense in keeping us closed off to the rest of the world anymore. The only reason that I genuinely can think of, and please tell me if there's any other reason, is because they just don't want to. And I don't want to say why, but I think that people just have their own personal vendetta of people coming into Japan. Feel free to agree or disagree in the comments below. I know that this is my opinion at the end of the day, but not to pat myself on the back here, but I'd like to think that I supported my thoughts on this with enough evidence in this video to not be so irrational about things that I said. But you can't please everyone, I guess. And some people are still going to be really headstrong about Japan being closed, so that's just the way life is. Maybe Joey has also pointed out some stuff in his video. I haven't seen it yet. He literally recorded it like an hour ago before this one, so feel free to go watch that if you want to. I'll link it in the description. But thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye!